What's been different working with him this offseason that sort of has illuminated maybe more about him or more about the way the organization works together now?
Well, I think one of the things that Schulte wanted to do was first off put a staff together that was going to be very proactive, very modern in how they think about solving problems. And the one thing I would say about Mike Schulte, with the additions of Jeff Albert and teaming up with Ollie Marmol, they've been very aggressive in terms of working. They're very intentional about what they want to see done. And you know, from my perspective, it's just been very impressive to watch and be a part of. And so his integration as a manager really with our entire front office has been something that I really have never seen before. And so when he's looking at combining what our analytics department can do to help, and then putting it in a situation where he feels he can, from a strategic side, make better decisions, but also from a developmental side of helping players improve. So I think that combination and that strategy has been just really interesting to unfold or watch it to unfold. And so when you ask like what's it been like, it's been energizing, because he is someone that has boundless energy. He's excited about this opportunity, and he certainly wants to make the most of it.
Where do you see Alex Ray is at right now as far as his recovery and possible role for the club?
Yeah, I think my first comment on Alex Ray should be that it's a huge year for him. In other words, when you've had 2 lost years, it's, you know, the clock's ticking, and you know it's very difficult to hit the reset button and make that just go away. So for him to be healthy this year, I think is, you know, paramount. I think when you ask like, well, what's his role going to be? I think the answer will come in time, but I think the organization needs to be prudent on how best to use him. But we also don't want to wake up at the end of the season and find out he had 50 innings, right? So, you know, when people talk about bullpen or starter, it would have to be a unique bullpen role where he could pile up some workload. And so I think that's something that we just have to think through. And maybe the very first question you asked was, what's his health and what's his status? And, you know, he's progressing well. It's going to be something that I think really the next 8 weeks will sort of dictate where he actually starts. And I think in that time period too, we'll take a heavy look at where we want to see him in terms of role. So I think the best answer for Alex Reyes is going to be answered in that time, but my fingers are crossed based on how he looks, his strength. He definitely took advantage of the offseason. In other words, he's fit. He's in a good spot. Now it just comes down to the arm has to work and the arm has to stay healthy.
Do you have a feel for how his spring is going to be structured?
In terms of like usage,
like how he's built up, is he built up a little differently?
Well, I think like really the first, you know, starting like February 1st, we'll get a really good sense of like, will he be part of the normal throwing program or will he be slightly pushed back? I do think the trainers have a perspective on this, and then there's the baseball side that has a perspective on this. I don't know if we have a meeting of the minds yet, and so I do think that's something that will unfold as we get down to June.
What have you heard from Carlos Martinez and his development in the offseason, working out? And because you were pretty candid about some of the players when we sat down at that big table about off-season accountability.
Yeah, and I think that goes really hand in hand with the question on Mike Schulte, because you know, Mike and his staff have been extremely intentional and diligent on staying in contact with players. So that part is being done. That is not something that necessarily rolls over onto my desk, but I do know it's happening. I think my best news of Carlos Martinez this offseason is I really haven't heard his name that much. In other words, I think he's, you know, had a nice quiet offseason, which I think is good news for all of us.
You mentioned modern proactive as something.
I think Jose has to come in with a very open mind, and nothing is written in stone or in ink. I mean, you know, there's a lot of unknowns, but I think, you know, the kind of offense he brings, he's going to find himself probably in every single game. And so he has to prepare himself that way. But in terms of you know, last year when we considered him as an everyday first baseman at one point, everyday right fielder. That may not happen coming out of camp.
You mentioned that teams will no longer automatically make those incremental improvements just as a reflex. Is part of that when there are fewer teams that are maybe trying to win, is it easier to sort of allow yourself to not make an incremental upgrade?
You're asking me to speak for
Broadly, from an
right.
executive's perspective.
Well, you're right, but it is an executive perspective, but I can't speak for people. And
Sure.
I'm giving you an observation that I think could possibly be happening, but based on that, I don't know exactly how they're thinking through it.
You and Mr. DeWitt have been actively anti-tanking and said that's why it's important to continue to compete every year. Would you like to see teams either punished or not rewarded for trying to lose, or at least looking like they're trying to lose?
Well, I would say in a free marketplace, we've been beneficiaries of that, right? Because we've been able to make trades to better our team because teams have been deciding directionally where they want to go. I think it's a difficult thing to legislate, but for me, I think the more opportunities a team like us that's trying to compete have, the better off we are.
When it comes to right field, can you confidently say Dexter Fowler right now is your starting right fielder?
I can. Now, Dex has to go out and prove it, but he's certainly going to get a lot of opportunities. And, but we have depth there. Like we've already talked about Martinez and O'Neill. So, I think this spring will be a telltale. But, healthy Dex, and if you think back to 2 years ago in Dex's year, if we got that, we'd be in a good place.
Do you feel for Gregerson's health, and is there an urgency for both him and Brett Cecil to have good competitive springs?
Yeah, a couple notes on that, and thanks for bringing that up. Let's start with Cecil. You're going to notice some weight loss when you see him. He's had a very active off-season, sort of back to the observation of intentionally staying in touch with people, but he has been someone that has been very aggressive in his off-season strategy to get himself in better shape, and he's in a good spot right now. And so we're feeling pretty good about where he is, and so that's exciting. And in Luke's case, obviously, last year was not the year he wanted to have. This off-season has not been perfect for him, so I think there could be some questions going into spring training on usage and how quickly he can get going. But our fingers are crossed that he can still be someone that helps us this year.
Can you describe not perfect or expand on that? He's just not been able to begin a throwing program?
He's begun his throwing program, but it just hasn't felt perfect for him. And I know that he's one of those guys, like when we were talking about the Andrew Miller question. But when you look at like Luke Gregerson, for example, when we signed him, he was coming off just a robust amount of innings and pitches and how he was used. And I guess what you learn is sometimes it just doesn't go on forever. And that's what we learned. And so in his case, it's trying to put the pieces back together a little bit and give him a fresh start. But it's a competitive bullpen, and so the one good piece of news we have is we can be a little patient.